Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video thumbs up. Melissa Dillon sat by herself in the design room at Forrester Creations in the busy center of Los Angeles, where the glitzy world of fashion clashed with the tangled webs of personal secrets. The sketches strewn across her desk were bathed in golden tones as the late afternoon sun streamed through the wide windows. After leaving her teaching days behind, Dillon, as everyone lovingly called her, had found a temporary refuge here. A glimmer of normalcy had entered her life through her connection with Deke, a reminder that not everything in this city centered around ruthless rivalries and covert goals. However, on this specific day, an unfamiliar number showed on the screen as she reached for her phone to check a message from Will. Her thumb hovered over the answer button for a little while as she hesitated. In her group, calls from unknown or blocked numbers were frequent, possibly from a supplier or even an incorrect number from an intern. She swiped to accept, sighing. "Hey." Her speech carried the assurance she had developed over years of negotiating life's unforeseen turns in a steady, professional manner. There was a faint crackling sound in the line, followed by a low, distorted voice that was eerily serene. The words spread out like a shadow growing longer at dusk. "It's me." Dillon's breath froze in her throat as she said, "We have some unfinished business." Suddenly, the air was heavier and the room felt smaller. She withdrew the phone from her ear and gazed at the screen as though it may disclose the identity of the caller. Even though she didn't recognize the voice, there was something in its tone that made her shiver. It was tinged with an intimacy that implied the speaker knew her, really knew her, beyond the surface of her current life at Forrester, rather than being hostile or overtly menacing. "Who is this?" She raised her voice a little and demanded. But before she could continue, the line died. As she placed the phone on the desk, her heart began to race. Unfinished business? She couldn't get the phrase out of her head like a nightmare. Dillon had always taken great satisfaction in making progress. She had entered this new chapter with resolve following her tenure as an art teacher, where she had dedicated her life to fostering creativity in young minds. Laughter and comfort were provided by friendships like the one with Deke, particularly as he dealt with his own complex feelings following his split with Remy. However, this call seemed to be opening a door from the past that she had previously believed to be securely closed. Remy Price was sitting on the couch across town, grinning mischievously, in a darkly lit apartment that held the ruins of a once vibrant love. Dillon's number, disconnected, was still visible in the call record on the phone he was holding. He had transformed his words into something unsettling and unintelligible by using a straightforward voice modulator program that anyone could download. He assured himself it was only a joke. That's how it began, anyway. Remy had brought layers of baggage back to Los Angeles that he wasn't prepared to discuss in public. His reunion with Deke had been hesitant, tense in a way that only ex-lovers could comprehend. Citing the need for distance and recuperation, Deke had made it apparent that he wasn't prepared to jump back in. However, Deke had revealed a vulnerable moment during their final talk at Il Giardino, admitting that he still thought love could overcome all obstacles. Remy had been troubled by those words, which brought up memories and fresh annoyances. In their tiny group, Remy's past with Deke was well known. Before jealousy, miscommunication, and the stresses of living in a city that never slept caused cracks to grow, they had been a passionate and intense relationship. Remy has always been the more impetuous, boundary-pushing person who enjoyed the rush. Whispers of a greater purpose, a hidden connection that even he was starting to fully understand, had accompanied his recent homecoming. Christian Weissman, the actor playing Remy, had implied in interviews that his return will further integrate him into the canvas, with decisions having an impact on friends, ex-partners, and surprising allies alike. Remy, however, kept his cards close for the time being, employing mischief and fun as defenses. It wasn't a completely random joke on Dillon. Remy had overheard brief exchanges and witnessed Dillon and Deke speaking inside the restaurant. Their laid-back companionship stood in sharp contrast to the tempest that was building inside of him. He questioned whether she was more aware of his history with Deke than she disclosed. Or maybe there was something more, something deeper. Remy laughed quietly at the warped, "It's me," as he repeated the conversation in his head. It was juvenile, to be sure, but it provided him a sense of control in a world when so much seemed unattainable. He threw the phone away and got up to pace the room. What if this small game revealed more than he had anticipated? What if Dylan's response revealed a relationship he had long suspected but never verified? Dylan tried to get over his discomfort back at Forrester. She occupied herself with swatches of fabric, tracing the textures with her fingertips as though they could give her a sense of stability. However, her thoughts strayed. Who might it be? The aim felt intimate even if the voice had been covered. The tensions with Electra, the confessions circulating around Ivy, and the way secrets seemed to froth up like champagne in this elite circle were all on her mind as she considered recent occurrences. Here, Dylan had quickly developed relationships, particularly with Deke, who had grown to be a confidant. He had casually brought up Remy, recalling their shared past with a mixture of sadness and nostalgia. One evening over coffee, Deke had remarked, "He's complicated. But deep down, there's something real there," Dylan said, listening as a friend and giving counsel without considering the possibility that she would get involved herself. Dylan chose not to bring up the call right away as the day went on. She didn't want to frighten anyone, especially Will or the other Forrester employees. The phrase "unfinished business," however, tormented her. There were shadows in her past. Dylan had experienced her fair share of secrets and heartaches prior to moving to Los Angeles full-time. There were old friends from her time as a teacher, transient relationships that had faded, but might not have entirely vanished. Is it possible that someone from that time period is making a comeback? Or was it connected to the Forrester world, where allegiance changed with the seasons? Dylan and Deke had a casual catch-up at a peaceful cafe by the shore that evening. In contrast to the stuffy design space, the aroma of salt and possibilities was brought by the ocean breeze. Deke greeted her with a genuine smile and an air of relaxation. They discussed everything and nothing, including their jobs, their aspirations, and the most recent drama involving Forrester. However, Deke's face slightly changed when Dylan revealed that he had received an odd call. What kind of oddity? He leaned forward and asked. The garbled voice, the incomplete business line, she explained. Deke's face briefly showed recognition as his eyes narrowed, but he quickly covered it up with worry. That sounds eerie. However, Deke's thoughts were racing. You should block the number, report it if it happens again. He was aware of Remy's propensity for dramatic movements and his ability to transform a straightforward feeling into something spectacular. Was his former partner responsible for this? Why target Dylan, if that's the case? Only cordial hellos had been said between the two. Unless, of course, there was more to Dylan than first appeared. Deke recalled that Remy had once hinted at a surprise link in his life that would make things more difficult. He had dismissed it as Remy being Remy at the moment. Doubt began to creep in now. Remy had followed from a distance, intrigued by the practical joke, but neither of them realized it. He felt a twinge of something as he observed them chatting and laughing from across the street. Jealousy? Sorry? Tempted to send a follow-up text, he took out his phone once more but restrained himself. Instead of escalating, the prank was intended to rattle. However, as he watched Dylan's animated movements, a recollection came to him. At first, it seemed hazy, like a dream that had been partially forgotten. Dylan's own past was entwined with flashes of a younger version of himself, possibly in a different setting. Had they ever met before? Remy dismissed it as paranoia and shook his head. However, the actor's words reverberated in his mind. Although the connection was surprising, it made sense and bound them in ways that would complicate relationships and require decisions with more significant repercussions. The typical enthusiasm was in the air at Forrester Creations the following day. Models flaunted sample clothing, designers gathered around mood boards as discussions about future collections flowed. Dylan immersed herself into her work, creating a new line that combined soft fabrics with robust lines, inspired by the tenacity of the coast. However, she became tense with each ring of her phone. During a break, she answered with more determination when the same anonymous number called again. The voice came back, still warped but slightly amused, saying, Listen, whoever this is, I'm not playing games. Games? Dylan, this isn't a game. History is catching up. Do you recall the previous studio? The one when poor choices and inexpensive wine were used to exchange secrets. The illusion was a powerful blow. Dylan's thoughts whirled. An old art studio from her days as a teacher? There, she had held casual get-togethers where budding artists interacted and shared vulnerabilities and stories. Was Remy one of them? Or someone with ties to him? She pressed for more, but the caller hung up once more. Dylan didn't brush it off this time. Piecing together bits, she confided in a reliable coworker. Remy, meanwhile, was sitting in his apartment going over what he had just said. He didn't intend to mention the studio. The excitement drove him to do so on the spur of the moment. However, it unleashed a floodgate presently. Years ago, Remy remembered going to one of those sessions, possibly in secret or under a different name, attracted by a friend. He had met a dynamic young woman there who was enthusiastic about mentoring, and her observations had quietly impacted his own creative trajectory. Dylan. The insight came gradually at first, then suddenly. Their paths had briefly crossed, a once-forgotten meeting that now seemed full of possibilities. The practical joke became into something more as the week went on. Motivated by a combination of mischief and sincere curiosity, Remy set up a covert meeting. At a local gallery opening where up-and-coming painters showcased their work, he accidentally ran across Dylan. He smiled charmingly and held out his hand, saying, "Sorry about that. Remy Price. Have we met? You seem familiar." Dylan examined him with keen intuition. Something, a glimmer of recognition that reflected her own discomfort, was visible in his eyes. At first, they had a brief conversation about the city, the art, and the Forrester buzz. But layers came off as the discussion got more in-depth. Remy tested the waters by hinting at previous relationships without giving up too much. Remy's demeanor shifted when Dylan brought up her experience as a teacher. "You mean art studios?" The atmosphere between them deepened during those late-night conversations where everything seemed imaginable. Faces from those events, one young man with intense eyes and a gift for evoking strong feelings, flashed through Dylan's mind. Is he the one? For his part, Remy was burdened by the secret connection that the play had hinted at. It was a shared history of vulnerability, of two souls colliding in a moment of creative upheaval, rather than something blood-related or scandalous in the conventional sense. Long before Deke came into his life, he had been there, motivated by her comments at a low period. He had been influenced by that impact, which added to the complexity of their current situation. Deke became increasingly concerned as soon as he found out about it. He told Dylan over the phone, "Remy's back with his usual flair." Dylan understood that it was more than a practical joke. Be careful, he pranks when he's feeling unsettled. Remy had used the eerie conversations as a means of investigating and rekindling an old issue that neither had completely addressed. As they continued to speak, things started to fit together. Dylan's presence intersected with Remy's distance from Deke, his return to Los Angeles, and the suggestion of a deeper connection. She had unintentionally contributed to Remy's path as a mentor whose support had persisted in his subconscious. As the truth was on the verge of being revealed, tensions increased. Dylan's diversion caught Electra's attention as she dealt with her own problems related to Ivy's revelations and family betrayals. "Is everything all right during a fitting?" she inquired. Dylan nodded, but doubts raced through his mind. Was Remy's practical joke a warning or an appeal for connection? Closing a shared chapter that may change friendships and allegiances was the unresolved matter, not retaliation or romance. Remy and Dylan reconnected in the days that followed, this time on purpose. They explored the past over coffee in a secret part of the city. Remy's voice became less distorted and more genuine as he acknowledged the calls. "I didn't intend to frighten you. I just saw you with Deke, and it reminded me of everything. You advised me to follow my passions fearlessly during that studio session years ago." Dylan listened, her initial anxiety turning into comprehension. "It stuck with me through everything." Now she recalled the enthusiastic participant whose inquiries had tested her pedagogical beliefs. Even though their relationship was short-lived, it had made an impression. It clarified the attraction, the discomfort, and the feeling of incomplete narratives. Remy was insecure about his position with Deke and in the wider world of Forrester's circle, which led to his awkward prank. However, it created opportunities for open communication. After hearing the whole narrative, Deke found himself at a crossroads. His conviction that love overcomes all obstacles was put to the test when new and old relationships blended together. Conversations with friends, minor changes in social gathering dynamics, and even influences on creative initiatives at Forrester are all examples of the cascading consequences. Remy's comeback was about more than just getting back together with Deke. It was about fully integrating with all the challenges that came with it. The joke served as a spur for development as the weeks stretched into months in the always dramatic city of Los Angeles. Dylan accepted her role as a person who connected the past and present in addition to being a designer. Remy reduced his mischievous behavior and directed his focus into genuine relationships. The three successfully negotiated the difficulties at quiet times, demonstrating that even eerie phone calls could result in significant discoveries. One night, while the city lights twinkled, Dylan stood on her balcony and thought about how a single distorted voice had revealed details she was unaware of. Their audacious and lovely lives were full of surprises, where past relationships had the capacity to reshape the future and practical jokes concealed more profound realities. Unfinished business frequently became fresh beginnings in this world of fashion, passion, and never-ending drama, reminding everyone that history had a way of returning at unexpected times. As Remy chooses to play a risky game that leaves Dylan shocked and doubting everything he believed to be true, tension rapidly rises. It begins with a spooky late-night phone call. Unsettling indications about past secrets are whispered by the distorted voice on the other end. Dylan initially thinks it's simply a random joke, but when the caller divulges more particular information that only someone close to him could know, his discomfort transforms into real anxiety. Remy appears amused by the mayhem he's causing while observing from a distance. What starts off as a harmless joke soon goes too far, especially as Dylan's paranoia intensifies. Not only is the call eerie, but it's deliberate. Dylan is forced to revisit times he would want to forget because every statement is intended to unearth buried memories. It becomes inevitable to wonder how Remy knows so much. Subtle hints that Remy and Dylan might have more than a current relationship start to emerge as the scenario gets increasingly intense. A previous encounter, one that didn't go well, is suggested by flashbacks and broken discussions. Dylan begins to piece things together, remembering a period when he might have met Remy in rather different circumstances. Was it a miscommunication or something far more serious? In the meantime, Dylan's unhappiness is becoming apparent to others around him. His actions become unpredictable, and his attempts to ignore them only serve to increase suspicion. Everything begins to fit together when he eventually confides in someone he can trust. Remy is conveying a message rather than merely pulling a practical joke. What does he want, though? Acknowledgement, retribution, or something more sinister? Although Remy's motivations are yet unknown, his behavior points to a more serious preoccupation. The hoax call might have been the first step in a much bigger scheme. Unaware of how far things might go, Dylan, now in a desperate search for answers, gets ready to confront Remy. Once concealed, their shared past could explode into the present with uncontrollable repercussions. One thing becomes clear as secrets become more apparent and their tension builds to a breaking point. This is not your typical practical joke. It's a challenge, a warning, and perhaps the start of a risky reckoning that could alter everything. Another scary call arrives just as Dylan believes he is prepared to confront the truth, leaving viewers to worry what horrifying discovery may follow.